Welcome to the Reddit mic.
Imagine finding a hidden online account belonging to someone you thought you knew well, only to realize their private thoughts are, frankly, terrifying. It's the kind of thing you hope never happens.
That's exactly the heart of the material we're exploring today. A Reddit post and its update from a user who stumbled upon the secret online footprint of their sister's partner.
Our mission in this deep dive is to take this stack of sources, unpack the layers of this jarring discovery, understand the implications of the deeply disturbing content that was found, and trace the difficult events that unfolded after this secret life was exposed, pulling out the key insights and surprising details the sources reveal.
Okay, let's unpack this story.
Right. So the scene is set by the original poster, we'll call her the OOP, a 21-year-old woman who did a simple, almost random Google search for her 27-year-old brother-in-law, John.
Okay, wait. Just Googled him, like out of the blue.
Yeah. Well, the sources note he's a journalist, so maybe searching his name isn't entirely, out of nowhere, but still.
But what she found was definitely not expected. She discovered a Reddit account. And the username was structured in a way that immediately raised flags, something like his real name combined with a birth year.
Yeah, exactly. The example of the source was like, John Doe's dead in 1997.
Yeah.
Really specific and a bit dark.
And then the posts themselves started confirming it.
Oh, absolutely. The identifying details just kept stacking up. The account was filled with posts complaining about his girlfriend, who is the OOP's sister, referred to as Jane, she's 28, in her family, specifically mentioning the OOP and their mother.
And the real clincher that confirmed it was him. Was it the names?
Yes, the posts mentioned unique first names. Both the OOP and Jane have uncommon first names. Apparently, they're less than basic surname, and other personal details scattered across the posts. It quickly became undeniably clear this was John.
Wow. So what was he posting? Just complaining.
A lot of it, yeah. The account contained around 100 posts, mostly buried in venting or ranting subreddits, or just posted directly to his profile. They didn't get much attention, typically 0 to 3 upvotes. But the sheer volume.
Yeah.
And it was largely complaints about Jane, the OOP, and their mother.
But the single most concerning post, the one that really sounds like the core of this, it was about the OOP herself, right?
That's the one.
Yep.
She described it as lengthy, disturbing.
Yeah.
Scrolling down for a solid 15 seconds just to read the whole thing.
15 seconds? That's a lot of text. What did it say?
In this post, John lays out what he sees as the problem. Her wariness around men due to past trauma, specifically mentioning sexual assault, SA. He actually describes this wariness as something that enrages him.
Enrages him that she's wary because of trauma.
Yeah. And then chillingly, he details this twisted, horrifying plan. He writes about planning to offer the OOP a ride home, but instead taking a scenic route through country lanes.
Oh, no.
To intentionally make her afraid for about 15 minutes.
Why? What possible reason could he have for that?
His stated goal in this terrifying scenario, to show her that not all men are creeps and want to hurt her, and somehow fix her by demonstrating he wouldn't harm her after actively inducing fear.
That's not fixing someone. That's manipulation. It's cruel.
It's incredibly disturbing. His rationale is just off. He claims it's unfair that she flinches when he makes big gestures or yells at the TV, insisting he'd never do anything. He actually believes he can fix me OOP more than my therapist.
Wow. Just wow. And the sources mention something about the tone. Incel-y talking points.
Right. The sources describe the post as containing weird incel-y talking points. For anyone unfamiliar, incel is short for involuntarily celibate, but the term often signifies this online subculture marked by resentment, misogyny, and anger towards women.
Which is weird, as the OOP pointed out, because he had a girlfriend.
Exactly. It adds another layer of confusion and concern. And his mindset, it's laid bare in his reply to one commenter who told him to get help. His response was simply, "I don't need help. She does."
Chilling. Just utterly chilling.
And looking beyond just that one post, his comment history reveals more of these disturbing patterns. The sources mention it's filled with those same weird incel talking points, alongside content about sexual assault, women's roles, and prejudiced views on race, ethnicity, and religion. Just a whole tapestry of red flags.
Okay, but how did he even know about her trauma? That seems really personal.
Right. From the OAB's own comments cited in the sources, we learned she actually had a breakdown in his car the previous year after being assaulted by an ex, and told him what happened then.
Oh, wow. So she confided in him.
It seems so. She also notes her sister likely told him about their father's abuse, and he probably just assumed OOP was affected by that too. So he had this information, this vulnerability.
And weaponized it. That's awful. And the OOP felt he was obsessed.
Yeah, her confusion about his fixation is palpable in the source material. She states they aren't even close. She primarily sees him because she visits her sister. She doesn't understand why he's so obsessed with her, calling it, quote, freaking me out.
I can only imagine. Okay, so she finds this. What happens immediately after?
So let's follow the timeline. In the immediate aftermath, as detailed in the original post's comments, the OOP told her mother and uncle just 2 hours after finding the account. Pretty quick reaction.
Good. Safety in numbers, telling people?
Definitely. They made the difficult decision to wait for her sister, Jane, to return from a work trip in 2 days before telling her, which must have been incredibly hard just sitting on that information.
Absolutely. And the account, did he delete it?
Not yet. Crucially, John's account remained active during this time, which suggests he maybe didn't know she had found it yet or just wasn't covering his tracks immediately.
Okay, so fast forward 2 months. The update post. They finally tell the sister Jane. How did that go down?
They sat Jane down, presented the evidence, screenshots, links, walked her through everything John had written, the whole horrifying picture.
And her reaction? Please tell me she believed it.
Well, according to the source, Jane's initial reaction was quiet shock, followed quickly by denial. Pretty strong denial, actually.
Denial? Like, how?
She suggested the OOP was overreacting, that John was just venting and didn't actually mean any of it. She even suggested the OOP was reading too much into his posts because of my past trauma.
Oh, wow. Turning it back on the OP.
Exactly. And claimed they didn't understand John like she does.
That sounds familiar, like classic denial patterns. Did it get heated?
It did. This escalated into an argument. Jane got upset. They talked over each other. Jane then incredibly blamed the OOP, suggesting she was always distant from John, and maybe that made him uncomfortable.
Unbelievable. So what did the OOP do?
At that point, the OP set a clear boundary. She stated she would limit contact with both of them if Jane chose to stay with him. Her mother and uncle backed her up, saying they couldn't trust John anymore. And Jane, she stormed out.
Tough situation, but a necessary boundary, it sounds like. Did Jane come back?
Yes. 2 days later, Jane showed up unexpectedly. She apologized and looked unrested, stating she'd been rethinking everything since she left. So maybe starting to sink in.
Okay, that's maybe a positive sign.
Maybe. However, in a frustrating turn mentioned in the update, Jane had told John about the discovery in those 2 days.
Oh no, they told her not to, right? For safety.
They did. The OOP checked, and his account had been immediately deleted the moment Jane confronted him. This annoyed both the OOP and their mother. Luckily, the OOP had saved all the evidence beforehand. Smart move.
Very smart. So what was John's reaction when Jane confronted him? Did he confess? Apologize?
Not even close. His reaction was a cascade of lies and deflection, as described in the update. He told Jane he had blocked the OOP on everything to preserve his career, making himself the victim, and was pissed off about being stalked.
Stalked? She Googled him and found public posts.
Exactly. And his most audacious lie. He claimed the account wasn't his at all, but belonged to someone at work who hates him.
The coworker defense.
Right.
Plausible.
Not remotely, according to the commenters, and frankly, common sense. We'll get into analyzing that lie more in a bit. But this confrontation and his reaction caused a rift between him and Jane.
So where does that leave everyone now, according to the update?
As of the update, the OOP had moved in with her uncle due to safety fears. Totally understandable. They looked into legal options based on the post, but found nothing helpful, which is often the case, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's tough. Intent versus action.
Right. Her uncle is helping her explore contacting John's work, though the OOP is understandably scared of John's reaction if they do. Big potential for backlash.
And Jane, is she still with him?
The update says Jane is still not totally settled on leaving, stating she just can't see John acting like the person revealed in the posts. That denial is still there, it seems.
So the OOP is low contact with her sister now.
Yeah, LC low contact with Jane. The sources do mention friends and family are supporting the OOP, which is good. She's not alone.
Okay, so that's the story, the timeline of what happened based on the sources. It's a lot to process.
It really is. But now we can kind of pull back and analyze what this all means. What can we learn from these posts, the reactions described, and crucially, the commentary from the community around these posts?
Right. Our deep dive into these sources reveals some powerful insights, particularly around John's behavior and Jane's initial reaction. John's lies, for example. That coworker story is just paper thin.
Totally. Commenters immediately picked up on the glaring inconsistencies. I mean, how would a coworker who supposedly hates him know such specific, deeply personal details about the OOP and her trauma history? Things she told John in confidence.
Exactly. It makes no sense. And why would this imaginary coworker immediately delete the account the very moment John is confronted by Jane? The timing is just too perfect.
Precisely. It's fascinating, though, how commenters discuss the nature of such transparent lies. Some pointed out that sometimes lies don't need to make logical sense if they're designed to be, like, too exhausting to unpack.
Like a fire hose of falsehood, just overwhelm you.
Yeah, that kind of idea. The sheer volume and absurdity can act like a fire hose of lies, just shutting down any attempt to refute them point by point. Some commenters even use terms like a liedra, like a hydra of lies, or described it as trying to baffle them with bullshit or create a Razil-Dazil effect.
Huh. Razzle-dazzle them with nonsense so they can't focus.
Right. Throwing so much confusing stuff at someone that they can't think straight or hold you accountable. Commenters even linked this tactic to things seen in political discourse or sometimes with addict behavior.
Yeah.
Just constant deflection and confusion.
Interesting. Okay, and then there's Jane's initial reaction, the denial. What did the comments suggest about that? Because that's hard to get your head around, too.
Yeah, looking at the commentary, several common psychological dynamics were suggested. One big one is cognitive dissonance. You know, that really uncomfortable mental state of holding two conflicting beliefs at the same time.
Like, I love my partner and he's good, versus here's proof he wrote terrifying things.
Exactly. That conflict is painful, so the mind tries to resolve it, often by dismissing the new, uncomfortable information. Denial.
Other commenters mentioned things like being blinded by love.
Right. Or simply not wanting to accept that her partner might be, well, a monster. The idea that she might have fallen in love with a mask John wears and accepting the truth means facing the incredibly difficult reality that she chose the wrong person, that her judgment was flawed.
That's a huge thing to confront.
It is. Commenters drew analogies like, neighbors of serial killers who swear they saw no signs.
Yeah.
It highlights that concerning pattern of people standing by partners despite overwhelming proof of abusive or dangerous behavior. And while the sources note she's only been with him 2 years, her denial, according to the update, seems quite deep.
Yeah, so the community was pretty clear on John being dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. That was a central takeaway from the commentary, woven throughout. Their interpretations of his scenic route plan, they went far beyond just wanting to scare her for 15 minutes.
What did they think it meant?
Many saw it as a potential setup for sexual assault. Perhaps even twisted attempt to recreate the night she told him about her SA trauma, maybe in his mind, a way to fix her or assert control or justify his disturbing focus on her.
That connection to the night she confided in him is deeply unsettling.
It really is. Someone mentioned an analogy, like a character wanting someone they feel they can't have and needing to fix them as a justification for their desire and control. The consensus advice from commenters was loud and clear. Prioritize safety above all else.
Avoid confrontation, especially when leaving.
Exactly. They universally described John's behavior using terms like screaming red flags. The danger felt very real to the community reading the posts.
It's also good that the sources highlighted the supportive advice given for coping with the anxiety the OOP described. That pre-panic attack feeling sounds awful.
Yeah, the community really stepped up there. People shared practical tools like the website youfeellikeshit.com, which is apparently a real thing for guided self-checks when you're feeling overwhelmed.
That's useful. And distractions.
Definitely. The value of healthy distractions like watching movies, doing crafts, or playing relaxing games like Stardew Valley or Tetris was mentioned. Simple things to occupy the mind.
Grounding techniques too, right? The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing.
Yes, that came up. Focusing on 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. It helps bring your mind back to the present moment when you're spiraling.
That's a classic one. Good reminder.
And there was even a practical tip about the link between blood sugar stability and mood anxiety, suggesting combining carbs and protein, just good general health practice, really, but noting it can help stabilize physical feelings when your mind is racing. These are presented as genuinely valuable insights shared within that community.
That's great. Community support can be so vital, but the safety concerns remain paramount.
Absolutely. Major safety concerns were a constant theme. One commenter specifically warned the OOP against sharing any location details online, even something seemingly innocuous like mentioning she was at my uncle's.
Because John might be looking, given his state of mind.
Precisely. Too risky. There was also significant concern that contacting John's work, well, maybe justified, could escalate things before the OOP and Jane are truly safe. You poke the bear, you might get a reaction you're not ready for.
Right, timing is crucial.
And the underlying fear that Jane might be putting herself in serious danger by staying with him and potentially giving him continued indirect access to the OOP's life through her. That was a very real worry expressed in the comments.
Okay, so pulling back now, this deep dive into these sources really shows us how uncovering a single hidden online account can just rip the mask off and expose a profoundly disturbing hidden side of someone you thought you knew.
Yeah. What our deep dive reveals is that stark contrast between a carefully constructed public persona, the journalist's boyfriend, and a chilling private reality revealed online. It shows the undeniable power of having concrete evidence, but also the incredibly difficult, sometimes dangerous complexities of confronting that reality, especially within families.
It really highlights how gaslighting can operate, doesn't it? Like John trying to make Jane doubt the evidence, or even Jane initially trying to make the OOP doubt her own interpretation because of her trauma.
Exactly. And it shows how deep denial can manifest, even when the proof seems overwhelming. And maybe most importantly, the critical importance of trusting your gut when faced with those red flags, even when, maybe especially when they come from someone inside your closest circle.
What really stands out when you look at the full picture presented in these sources is not just the potential threat John represented, which is huge, but also that complex and fraught dynamic with his partner Jane and the immense struggle for a family to navigate such a volatile situation.
Totally. Looking back at everything, I think the key takeaways are about the unsettling truth the digital world can reveal about people we think we know, and how sometimes the hardest part isn't finding the truth. It's convincing others, even those we love, to see and accept what's right there in front of them, and then figuring out how to deal with the fallout safely.
Which brings us to a really important question for you listening right now. Given how easily hidden online lives can reveal dangerous intentions, and how difficult it can sometimes be to convince others, even with clear evidence, what responsibility do you feel you have if you were to uncover something similarly disturbing about someone you know? What would be your immediate first step, and who would you trust to help you navigate such a complex and potentially dangerous situation? All right, moving on to the next story.
It's about a blended family, and, well, things get really complicated. It's a compelling account for sure.
Yeah, really difficult dynamics. So this deep dive, we're basically going to walk through what happened, look at it from different angles, the original story, the update, the comments.
Right, see what we can pull out about, like, family relationships, boundaries, what happens when things really go off the rails.
Exactly. So the setup is we've got this original poster, OOP, she's 17.
Yeah, 17.
Yeah.
About to graduate high school, planning this big summer trip with her friends.
And this trip, it wasn't just given to her, was it? She earned it.
That's a really crucial detail. She paid for it herself, saved up babysitting money since she was, 13?
Wow, since 13. That really says something about her maturity, her independence.
Absolutely, especially when you contrast it with the family situation she's describing.
Right. So the family, her dad remarried about 1.5 years after her mom passed away.
Mm-hmm. And he married a woman who had her own daughter, Lily, who was 13 at the time OOP was writing, so a few years younger.
And right away, it sounds like the problem started. The dad and stepmom started pushing Lily onto OOP.
Pretty much immediately, yeah. Expecting them to be joined at the hip, do everything together. OOP felt like she was basically forced into being a caretaker.
For a teenager, not a little kid. And OOP's view of Lily is, well, she doesn't hold back.
No, she describes her as uncontrollable, spoiled, prone to tantrums to get her way. Real difficult behavior.
The source gives some pretty stark examples, doesn't it? Like the birthday party.
Oh, the 16th birthday party, yeah. So OOP's party, but Lily gets her own cake.
Okay, bit weird, but maybe.
And then blows out OOP's candles.
Yikes. Okay, that's not okay. And the dad's response?
It was basically, time to grow up, being a sister is about sharing, which is just completely dismissive of OOP's feelings.
Sharing your birthday candle moment? Wow. And when OB said she's not my sister, Lily apparently had a rampage.
Yeah, it paints a picture of really poor handling of Lily's behavior by the parents and just a lack of protection for OOP.
And there was another example, the bowling thing.
Right, another instance where OP was basically forced to supervise Lily. And the night gets ruined because Lily's like trying to dig in the ball return, running down the lane.
Oh my gosh.
Stuff that needs intervention. But OOP says this kind of thing happened often, and the parents just didn't seem to care, left it to her.
It sounds less like blending a family and more like unpaid childcare, almost.
Parentification, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll probably get to that later.
Yeah.
But this dynamic, it really comes to a head with the graduation trip.
Ah, yes, the trip she saved up for. She tried to keep it secret from Lily, right? Smart move.
Very smart. But Lily apparently eavesdropped, found out anyway.
Of course. And then immediate conflict.
Predictably.
Yeah.
Lily demands to go. OP says absolutely not. Her friends are apparently begging her not to bring Lily along either.
Understandable. So then the adults get involved.
Yep, the father steps in, asks OOP to take Lily, saying she could use a vacation.
A vacation from what? Being 15? Anyway, OOP refuses.
She refuses. Says she's not going to be a babysitter for almost 3 weeks on her graduation trip with her friends. Which is, completely reasonable.
Totally, but the stepmother didn't see it that way.
Not at all. She apparently escalated things quickly, called OOP selfish.
Ouch.
And then argued that because the father was paying a portion, remember OP saved most of it, that Lily had to go.
Wow, the logic there is questionable.
And then came the threat. Cancel OOP's entire trip if Lily isn't included.
Using the trip she worked so hard for as leverage, that's low.
It's a major power play. And this is where OOP really puts her foot down.
What does she say?
She told the stepmother she had zero say in the matter, she wasn't her mom, and to stop forcing her kid onto her.
Good for her. That must have gone over well.
About as well as you'd expect. Lily got upset again, and then the father delivered the final ultimatum. He wouldn't pay the rest of the trip costs if OOP didn't take Lily. He backed his wife.
Oof. Choosing sides pretty clearly there.
And that's when OP hits back, hard. Tells him if he does that, she won't talk to him, won't forgive him. A really powerful moment for a 17-year-old.
Absolutely. Setting a major boundary. His response.
Dismissal again. Said she was being dramatic, claimed Lily wasn't that bad.
Despite all the evidence she'd presented. So, what did OOP do? She didn't cave, did she?
Not for a second. She packed a bag right then and there and left. Went to her maternal aunt's house.
Wow. Just walked out.
Yep. Took immediate action.
And the aunt? Was she supportive?
Incredibly supportive. Right away offered to cover the part of the trip costs her dad was threatening to withhold.
That's amazing. What a contrast.
Huge contrast. And the aunt also offered her a place to stay for college, basically stepping into that supportive parent role.
So OOP found an escape route and real support. How did the father react to her actually leaving?
He apparently blew up her phone, called her a brat, and then said this really telling thing, that the stepfamily was her family now, not her aunt.
Trying to dictate who her family is, that's quite something. It ignores all the history with her mom's side.
Completely. And just to clarify, OP did mention in the original post that, as far as she knew, Lily didn't have any diagnosed disability. She'd seen doctors, therapists.
Right.
But OP's perspective remained that Lily was just insanely spoiled. She brought up that Mexican restaurant story again, Lily screaming for 10 minutes in the car over not getting her way as kind of proof of that.
Okay, so that's OOP's take. But the community, the commenters on Reddit, they had other thoughts too, right?
Oh, yeah. The comment section was buzzing. Huge support for OOP and the aunt.
Ernst James bet and a lot of criticism for the father and stepmother.
Definitely. People were really questioning the father's priorities.
Yeah.
But there was also a lot of discussion about Lily's behavior itself.
More than just spoiled.
Yeah. Many commenters wondered if there might be something more going on, something undiagnosed. They pointed to things like, needing a babysitter at 15 or 16.
That is unusual.
Right. Or the bowling incident, the lack of impulse control. Suggestions came up like maybe autism or an intellectual impairment. Even FASD was mentioned.
But OOP said there was no diagnosis she knew of.
Correct. She was clear on that. And that the parents just called it spoiling. So the source gives us those two angles. The family saying spoiled, the community wondering if it's more complex.
Interesting. But either way, the impact on OOP was the main thing.
Exactly. Which leads to that other big theme in the comments, parentification.
Ah, yes. Expecting her to act like a parent to Lily.
Precisely. Commenters really latched on to that, saying she was being forced into a caretaker role, managing Lily's emotions and behavior, which absolutely wasn't her job.
It's the parent's responsibility and the father's role in all this. The commenters didn't let him off the hook.
Not at all. He was seen as passive, maybe complicit, basically choosing his new wife and stepdaughter over his own child's well-being.
It's a sadly common theme sometimes in these blended family stories online.
It is. And people were very clear that it wasn't OOP's job, especially as a minor in their home, to fix their broken dynamic or somehow manage these adults.
You can't put that on a kid. So she left, went to her aunt's, then there was an update post later, right? About 6 months later.
Yes, almost 6 months on. August 30th, 2024 was the date on the update.
And the trip, did it happen?
It did, without Lily.
Yeah.
OOP said it was fun, and she felt, quote, free from a burden. She even extended the trip.
Good for her. That feeling of freedom must have been incredible. What was it like at home before she left, though, after the big blow-up?
Sounds like it was incredibly tense, lots of silence. She relied heavily on her aunt during that period before leaving for the trip.
And after she got back from this extended, burden-free trip, how did Dad react then?
More anger, lots of yelling. And the stepmother complained that OOP left them in a tough position.
A tough position? How?
Because, according to the stepmom, they had to stay home because they couldn't get anyone to watch Lily.
Watch a 15 or 16-year-old. Again, that detail is so telling.
It really is. The comments jumped all over that, highlighting how unusual it was and how much the parents seemed to rely on OOP, whether they admitted it or not.
It suggests Lily really did require a level of supervision most teens don't. So what happened next? Any reconciliation attempts?
There was an attempt at father-daughter therapy, but it kind of fell apart.
Why?
Because the father apparently kept trying to bring the stepmother and Lily into the sessions.
Even though OP had made it clear she wanted space from them.
Exactly. He seemed incapable of just focusing on his relationship with OP. It was like a package deal or nothing.
That couldn't have helped. And did things escalate again?
Massively. This led to the absolute final straw. During this period, the stepmother called OP a selfish C word.
Whoa, serious?
Seriously. And the father. He heard it and said nothing. Stood there in silence.
Wow. Silence in that moment is an action, a choice.
Absolutely. And that silence, that lack of defense, was it for OOP. She decided right then to go fully, no contact, NC with him and the stepfamily. Done.
Can't blame her. That's a huge betrayal. So where did that leave her? How's she doing now, according to the update?
Actually, she seems to be thriving. She's moved away to college, living on campus.
Getting away physically, that helps?
Sure. Said she's doing well mentally, making new friends, joined some clubs, honored society, creative writing, building her own life.
That's great to hear. And therapy.
Yes. Crucially, she's getting her own therapy now, specifically to process her mother's death.
Something her father never helped her with.
Apparently not. The update implies this was overlooked grief, adding another layer to the father's neglect beyond just the stepfamily issues.
Man, it really puts his actions in a different light. And the aunt. Still supportive.
Oh, absolutely central. OP calls her a surrogate mom. Their bond is clearly incredibly strong. There was this really touching moment described where the aunt just promised OP she would always be there for her.
That's the kind of support she needed.
Exactly. And there's more good news on that front, too. Kind of a lovely turn. The aunt, who had been told she probably couldn't have children, is pregnant.
No way.
That's wonderful.
Isn't it? And OP is going to be the godmother. She's super involved planning the baby shower. It feels like she's genuinely building this new chosen family with her aunt.
That's beautiful. Escaping the toxic dynamic and building something positive and loving. Did the father try to reach out again after the no contact?
He did try once. Apparently while OOP was packing up for college. He showed up.
How did that go?
Well, the telling part is that he apparently had to lie to his wife about where he was going just to see his own daughter.
Oh, wow. Still caught between them. Sneaking around.
Yeah. And seeing he still couldn't be honest or prioritize openly, that just cemented OOP's decision. She stopped the joint therapy attempts completely and maintained the no contact.
Seems like the only healthy option she had left. So looking at the whole story, the original post, the update, the comments, what are the big takeaways, the lingering thoughts?
Well, one thing commenters speculated about a lot was the future of the father and stepmother's relationship.
You mean without OOP there to manage Lily?
Exactly. The prediction from many was that their marriage might really struggle now that the buffer and built-in babysitter was gone.
And that the father might end up relying on Lily, the stepdaughter he enabled, which could be challenging given the behavior described.
Potentially very challenging. It really underscores the long-term consequences of parental choices, especially that recurring theme of parents seemingly sidelining biological kids for new partners. The comments were pretty harsh on that.
There's such a stark contrast presented, isn't there? OOP flourishing, building this new life with her aunt's support.
Right, finding independence and healing.
Versus the anticipated future for the father and stepfamily, which seems fraught with the problems they never really addressed, just expected OOP to handle.
And it really counters that one negative comment mentioned that OP was giving up. The overwhelming sense was, no, she wasn't giving up. She was setting boundaries.
Protecting herself. removing herself from harm.
Exactly. It was self-preservation, not giving up. The source material really suggests the parents were just totally unprepared for her to actually be independent and leave.
Like they thought she'd just put up with it forever, continue being the caretaker indefinitely.
It kind of seems that way. It speaks volumes about their own lack of preparedness or willingness to handle Lily's needs themselves. They built a system relying on OOP, and when she rightly prioritized herself, their system couldn't hold.
Wow. This deep dive, it really does show the tangled webs in blended families, doesn't it? And how much parental choices matter.
Absolutely. Enabling behavior, failing to protect your child.
Yeah.
It causes deep wounds, but it also shows incredible resilience is possible.
Yeah, finding support, even if it's outside the immediate household, can lead to healing, new beginnings. It's powerful stuff.
Makes you think, doesn't it? About how family isn't always blood, about where true loyalty lies, and the courage it takes sometimes to choose your own path.
Definitely. What does this story make you consider about, I guess, the definition of family and what responsibility really means when faced with those kinds of impossible choices? All right, moving on to the next story.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into a story from the internet that, went viral. And you can see why it's kind of hilariously audacious, but also painfully relatable for a lot of people. The post is titled, AITO for tricking my parents into being on time for my wedding, plus 2-year update.
Right. And we've also pulled in the juicy follow-up stuff about a certain cousin. Of course, you have to look at the comments section. It's massive, full of insights.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission here really is to dissect this whole situation. We want to understand the dynamics, dealing with family members who are just chronically late.
And explore the creative ways people cope. Sometimes questionable ways, let's be honest. We'll look at the long-term consequences and, well, ultimately, what this specific story and how the community reacted tells us about bigger things like time, respect, family expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because at the heart of it, this is a problem so many people face, right? Having relatives, often parents, who are habitually just frustratingly late for everything. In this story, it's the original poster, or OO. He's a 33-year-old guy. And it's his parents, particularly his mother. We're talking a history here, missing graduations, showing up halfway through important family events, causing disappointment year after year.
Yeah, and the story mentions his wife. She was 28 at the time, understandably kind of half-joked about what might happen if his mother was late for their wedding, and that clearly struck a nerve with OOP.
You bet it did. It was that deep history, wasn't it, of lateness, disappointment. It's what pushed him to do something pretty extreme. His dad apparently just kind of accepted it. His siblings, too, they'd learned to live with it.
Yeah, it wasn't just like a small inconvenience. It was genuinely impacting major life moments, a source of real frustration.
So for his own wedding, OOP comes up with this plan. He even calls it a dick move himself. So what did he actually do?
Well, he had a single, very special wedding invitation printed up. Just one copy.
Just for his parents?
Just for his parents. And on this invitation, the ceremony time was listed as 1 hour earlier than the actual start time.
Wow. An hour buffer. Okay, so wedding day arrives. What happens then?
Well, according to OOP, his mother was in a total panic, absolutely frantic, thinking they were going to be late. Apparently, she had some role in the ceremony, too, which added to the stress.
Right.
But get this, they arrived 45 minutes after the fake time.
Which means?
Which means they were actually 15 minutes early for the real ceremony time.
Huh. Okay. And her reaction?
Apparently, she was just hugely relieved. I saw other guests still arriving, parking their cars, and just assumed, that the wedding was starting a bit late, as sometimes happens, so she just went with it.
And that's the key thing, isn't it? The trick worked. For the event itself, anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The ceremony, the photos, the reception, everything went off without that usual drama hanging over it because they were actually there. Early, even.
He got his goal for the day. He ensured they were present, on time for the actual wedding, and just kicked the can down the road in terms of the fallout.
Yeah, deferred the potential explosion until, well, much later.
Because you can't keep a secret like that forever, right? Especially not in a family. So fast forward 2 years, there's a family dinner.
Right. And the scene is almost predictable. The family's waiting for the parents before they start grilling. Sounds familiar, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the mother, maybe trying to make a point or rewrite history a little, confidently says something like, "See, I'm not always late. I was on time for your wedding."
Oh, boy. And this is where it unravels. Enter Cousin John. OOP calls him his idiot cousin. But you get the sense it's kind of affectionate antagonism.
Yeah, John apparently couldn't resist. He just snorted.
A snort. That's all it takes sometimes.
Then other family members started giggling. The mother picks up on the vibe, obviously, demands to know what's so funny. And that's when OOP fesses up, spills the beans about the special invitation.
The big reveal. How did that land?
Predictably. Not well. She was furious, pissed, felt foolish, probably humiliated in front of everyone. And her immediate reaction wasn't, oh, wow, I really am that bad. It was to accuse OOP of not trusting her.
Which is, I mean, it's pretty astonishing, right? Considering she was 45 minutes late for the time she was actually given.
Exactly. And then there's that detail about the invitation itself. It's almost unbelievable.
Oh, the framed invitation. Yes.
She'd been so proud of being on time, or what she thought was on time, that she'd actually framed the fake invitation and hung it up.
No way.
Yes. And OOP admitted he was already, plotting this elaborate heist with his sisters to swap the fake one with a real one before she ever noticed the time difference.
A heist. The layers of planning on his side. It's incredible.
It really tells you something about the dynamics, doesn't it? The lengths he felt he had to go to.
Totally. And speaking of family dynamics, this story prompted commenters to ask about another story involving Cousin John. Something pretty extreme involving a body cavity search.
Yeah, it definitely sheds light on that playful but sometimes pretty intense rivalry between OOP and John. Apparently, despite the antagonism, there's some underlying trust there.
So what was the story?
OOP explained that they'd been on a trip to Mexico together. Just before crossing back into the U.S., OOP got his hands on some training material used for drug-sniffing dogs.
Okay.
Totally legal stuff, apparently, but specifically designed so dogs would flag it. He put a tiny bit on John's backpack.
Oh, no. Just to mess with him.
Pretty much. He said they often got flagged for extra screening anyway, being young guys, one with a South American background but a Canadian passport. He knew John was clean, probably just hungover.
But the dog hits on the backpack.
Exactly. And, border crossing, young guy, flagged by a dog. It escalated fast.
All the way to a body cavity search. Yikes. That's more than a prank.
Yeah, even OOP admitted in the post that it was total overkill. He felt bad and apologized to John later. John apparently understood eventually.
Wow. Okay, so that gives us a flavor of the family's energy, let's say.
Definitely. It's a wild example of their specific brand of humor and interaction, but also shows that, apologies happen, things get smoothed over.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the main lateness issue. Because the story didn't stop with the wedding reveal, did it? There's a pretty significant 2-year update. And it involves OOP's younger sister's wedding.
Right. The mother was still apparently quite bothered by the original wedding trick, still bringing it up, and she seemed determined to prove, this time, she could be on time.
Okay, determined mom.
So she gets heavily involved in planning the sister's wedding. Specifically, she locks in a noon ceremony slot at a church that was known for having a really tight schedule. Back-to-back weddings.
High stakes then. No room for error. And OP sees this situation and thinks, let's make a game out of it.
Pretty much. He sets up a betting pool, $10 to enter. Guess how late the parents will be for the sister's wedding.
Oh my God, what was the prize?
Not cash. It was actually kind of clever. The prize was passes like little tickets that let you clink your glass to make the bride and groom kiss during the reception. A tradition OOP apparently hates, but he used it as the incentive.
That's hilarious. And did people bet? How much did they raise?
Oh, yeah. They raised almost $1,500 for the sister's honeymoon fund.
Wow. What were most people betting?
Most people bet on time. They figured, after the first wedding, after her being so involved, after all the talk, she had to make a point this time. She had to be on time.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But knowing this story, what was the actual outcome?
Well, the winning guess, first reported as 25 minutes late, but OOP later clarified it was actually 35 minutes late, maybe even a bit over half an hour.
35 minutes. Who won?
The winners were OOP himself, Cousin John, naturally, and their sister Yvonne.
Of course. Over half an hour late. After everything. And the consequence of that lateness, given the tight schedule at the church.
This is the truly jaw-dropping part. They were so late that they arrived, basically, as things were wrapping up. Depending on which comment you read about ceremony length and church rules, they either arrived while people were literally cleaning up decorations to make way for the next wedding party, or potentially after the ceremony had completely finished. OOP's update strongly implies they missed the whole ceremony, their own daughter's wedding ceremony.
Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. After 2 years of complaining about the first trick, getting involved in planning, everyone betting on her, still late. Miss your daughter's wedding. What was her reaction this time?
Still focused on OP, apparently. Still framing his original trick, the fake invitation from 2 years prior, as his attempt to embarrass her.
Wow.
It's like completely sidestepping the fact that her chronic lateness just caused her to miss her daughter's wedding. The pattern is just undeniable, but she seemed unable or unwilling to see her own role in it.
This whole saga, it's no wonder it resonated. The comments section must have just exploded with people sharing their own stories and trying to figure out why. Why are some people like this?
It really did, and that's one of the most fascinating parts of digging into the source material here. The comments offered these really valuable perspectives that kind of fell into two main camps. It helps you look beyond just the frustration.
Okay, what were the camps?
So one view is that chronic lateness can be, well, basically selfishness, or even a kind of subtle power play.
A power play. How so?
Some commenters felt, based on their experiences, that certain people do it deliberately, maybe consciously, maybe not, but it's a way to show they have power, making everyone else wait, being the center of attention when they finally arrive, that kind of thing.
You can sort of see that, right? Especially with stories like people being super late to their own parties, or that anecdote someone shared about a coworker literally sitting in their car outside until they were officially late.
Exactly. Those stories feed into that perception. But then there's this other really significant perspective that came up again and again in the comments.
It was?
Pointing towards conditions like ADHD, or what people sometimes call time blindness.
Ah, right. Like it's not intentional disrespect.
That's the idea. Commenters who have ADHD or know people who do, they shared how it's a genuine, often really distressing difficulty with perceiving time, managing tasks, estimating duration. It's not about wanting to be late.
So they talked about needing constant reminders, timers.
Yeah, needing timers for everything, building in huge buffer periods that still somehow evaporate, and the immense shame and anxiety that comes with always struggling, always letting people down, even when you're trying really hard not to.
That's such a crucial distinction.
Yeah.
Because the impact on the person waiting, the frustration, the missed stuff, it's the same. But the reason behind it could be totally different.
Exactly. It means lateness isn't always, a moral failing or pure selfishness. It can stem from neurodevelopmental differences, from cognitive challenges. And that completely changes how you might think about addressing it.
Yeah, it really does. And the sheer range of anecdotes people shared in the comments really highlights this spectrum. You had the woman 3 hours late to her own birthday dinner.
Which is just, wow.
Right. Or the friend who was just routinely hours late for everything. And the really sad ones, like the person who was late to her own mother's funeral because she was just all over the place.
3 hours late for your own birthday. That becomes the main event, doesn't it?
Totally. There was also that coworker story, sitting in the car until 30 minutes late before coming in. And people sharing dating experiences where lateness felt directly tied to how much the other person actually prioritized them.
Yeah, all those examples paint a really vivid picture.
And OP himself brought up cultural context too, didn't he? Mentioning he's Latino and how time perception can sometimes differ, which sparked more discussion of the comments.
He did, yeah. He added an edit later, acknowledging commenters who picked up on his background. He noted it can be a thing in some cultures, and people shared related stories, like, a Cuban baptism where everyone was told it started an hour earlier because otherwise nobody would show up on time.
Right.
Or people discussing different expectations around punctuality they saw in, say, international MBA programs. It's important, though, that we're just reporting what the source material discussed here.
Absolutely.
There were varied perspectives presented in those comments. Some saw lateness as maybe a cultural norm in certain relaxed settings, while others pushed back hard, saying, basic consideration and punctuality, especially for important events, is pretty universal. They argued it's often more about the individual or the specific context, like formal versus casual, than some broad cultural trait. We're just relaying the different views people shared.
Gotcha. It definitely adds another layer of complexity to think about. So, okay, given that this is such a widespread problem and the reasons behind it can be complex, what did people in the comments actually do about it? What strategies did they share for coping or pushing back?
Well, this is where it gets really practical. What you see in the comments is this shift, often born from years of frustration, moving away from just enabling the behavior towards setting boundaries. And often, those boundaries involve consequences.
Okay, like what?
A really common one was simply Stop waiting.
Just carry on without them.
Yeah. People talked about starting dinner at the scheduled time, whether the late person was there or not, leaving for the movie, the concert, the event right on time, professors starting class exactly when it's supposed to start.
Letting the lateness actually impact the late person, not just everyone else.
Precisely. There was a great example someone shared about their mother-in-law. Her daughter was always late for family meals. So the MIL just stopped waiting, started serving food on time. Eventually, the daughter started showing up on time because she hated missing the initial gathering, the conversation, the hot food.
Huh. Natural consequences working there. What else?
Well, there's OOP's strategy, telling the late person an earlier time. Lots of commenters said their families do this habitually for certain relatives. You know, telling Great Aunt Mary the party starts at 5 when it really starts at 7.
Sounds like a lot of mental overhead, keeping track of the fake times. But I guess you do what you got to do.
Seems like it. Driving separately was another big one, like OOP's stepdad did in the update, or that bride someone mentioned who always drove herself places, even if going with her husband, just so she wouldn't be late because of him.
Takes control back.
Yeah. And then just implementing really strict deadlines. Like the person who announced, dinner is served at 6:30 sharp. If you arrive at 7, you can eat it cold or figure something else out. Basically saying, I'm not ruining the meal or the event for everyone else anymore because of you.
These strategies really underline that point where patience runs out, doesn't it? Where enabling just stops feeling like an option. And some of the stories about extreme lateness people shared were just chilling.
The funeral stories were really something, people being late to funerals. Someone even shared a story, horrifying if true, where the body was apparently misplaced, causing huge delays, but the relatives still managed to be late.
Oh my goodness.
And then there was that recurring anecdote about Elizabeth Taylor. Famously late for everything. Apparently she even planned to be late for her own funeral.
It's a commitment to the brand, I guess.
Wow. It definitely makes you think.
Okay, let's circle back to OOP's story. Specifically his mother's main complaint after the reveal. You didn't trust us. That line seemed to really hit a nerve with commenters, but maybe not in the way she intended.
Not at all. People really zeroed in on the sheer audacity of that statement. The irony was just overwhelming. She's furious about not being trusted to be on time. Yet she proved demonstrably, with the hour head start, that she couldn't be trusted to be on time for the first wedding. And then, after 2 years of simmering resentment about this supposed lack of trust, she goes and misses a huge chunk, likely all, of her other child's wedding ceremony because she was, again, significantly late.
Her own actions just kept proving the lack of trust was completely justified. And then reinforcing it.
Exactly. Her reaction seems totally disconnected from her behavior. It's focused on his response, not her actions that prompted it.
Yeah, it misses the fundamental point.
Some commenters speculated, maybe on some level the lateness itself or the drama that follows is a way for her to make events about her. So being tricked or called out isn't just embarrassing, it's maybe about losing that control, that centrality.
Interesting thought. Well, looking back at this whole journey then, from this one guy's pretty wild wedding trick to the huge online conversation it triggered, what are the main things we can take away?
Well, I think first, it's clear chronic lateness is incredibly common, deeply frustrating, and genuinely strains relationships. Second, we've seen the reasons behind it are complex. It might stem from personality traits like selfishness or a need for control, or it could be rooted in neurodevelopmental differences like ADHD or time blindness, which isn't about intent at all.
Right, it's not always straightforward.
Not at all. And third, we've seen the wide range of strategies people use to cope when they've had enough. Moving from just accepting it to drawing boundaries, enforcing consequences, trying to protect their own time in important moments.
It really does highlight how tangled up issues of time, respect, and family expectations are in our everyday lives, doesn't it? And maybe listen to this, you recognize this dynamic, maybe in your own family or with friends. It's clearly more than just a few minutes here or there. It's the ripple effect, the impact on others, the missed connections, the resentment that can build up.
Absolutely. And ultimately, this whole deep dive kind of pushes us to think about accountability, doesn't it? If being consistently late, whatever the reason, negatively impacts other people and disrespects their time, well, at what point does constantly facilitating that, always waiting, always rearranging things, just become enabling?
Yeah. What's the real cost to the relationship, and maybe even to the late person themselves, of not holding them accountable for how their actions affect others?
It leaves you with a final thought, really. What does it genuinely mean in these day-to-day interactions to respect someone's time, both your own time and theirs?
Definitely something to mull over. especially next time you find yourself checking your watch or maybe running a bit behind schedule yourself.
All right, moving on to the next story. So let's unpack this. We're going to pull back the curtain today on a lifestyle that, from the outside looking in online, it often seems incredibly free, adventurous. You know, the traveling RV family.
Oh, right. You see those highlight reels everywhere, amazing landscapes, all this family togetherness, this like promise of ultimate freedom.
Exactly. But what's the actual lived reality, especially for the kids growing up always on the move and maybe more importantly, always on camera?
That contrast, yeah, that's absolutely central to what we're looking at today. Our source material is it's a really raw and powerful set of posts and comments off Reddit. We're diving into a post from an 18-year-old. Her username is EducationalArmy915. And she basically laid out her whole experience growing up in one of these very public online RV families and the huge conversation that her story kicked off.
So our mission here is to kind of extract the big insights from her story, which is intensely personal, and also from that huge community reaction. We want to uncover those aha moments about maybe the hidden costs of making content like this.
Yeah, and just give you a thorough but hopefully digestible understanding of the really serious issues she brought up. It's quite a journey, starting from like a tiny bunk bed and ending up with this pretty dramatic escape plan.
And it really opens up a much bigger societal conversation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So let's jump into that original post. We've got this 18-year-old one, the original poster, or OOP, and she's recounting her life.
Okay.
She's been living in an RV like full-time since she was 7 years old. Her parents travel all over the U.S. Her dad works online.
Standard setup for this kind of thing, often.
Right. And the mom creates online content. And it's big enough, apparently, that they sometimes get recognized in public.
Wow.
And the camera. She says it's just been a constant presence for as long as she can basically remember. She even mentioned, using a throwaway account for Reddit because she'd already had way too much unwanted attention over the years.
Yeah, I can imagine. And the living situation she describes, it's frankly a world away from those aspirational, like super spacious RVs you sometimes see online.
Totally.
Yeah.
She sleeps in a tiny bunk bed.
Yeah.
Says she outgrew it years ago.
And the other bunk.
That's just storage. It's crammed full of all her stuff. So there's no actual room for her, just a curtain for privacy.
Just a curtain. Wow.
Yeah. And she notes, kind of wryly, that at least she's an only child, so she doesn't have to share the space that's already minuscule. It just paints this picture of like zero personal space, zero boundaries, right from a young age.
Absolutely. And that physical confinement, it sounds like it was mirrored by a real lack of social interaction and educational stability, too.
For sure. She was homeschooled for years, then she switched to online high school, but that was at her own insistence.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which kind of speaks volumes, right? About her wanting something more structured.
Right.
But she had, and this is stark, zero in-person friends.
Zero.
Because the longest her family ever stayed in one place was just 1 month.
A single month. Just imagine trying to build any kind of real friendship like that.
Exactly. Impossible.
And you can just feel the exhaustion, the frustration just coming off her original post. She says she hates the lifestyle, hates the constant travel, the heat, the bugs, being forced to go hiking.
Right. She feels like a pet.
Yeah.
Her parents just sort of cart around. That's her word.
Wow. A pet.
Yeah. And she calls her parents delusional because they genuinely seem to believe this nomadic existence is just the absolute best way to live, apparently without much thought for her feelings or needs.
And all she wants is, what? A normal life.
Pretty much. A normal life.
Yeah.
Go to college, make some real lasting friends. Simple things, really.
Things most people take for granted.
Yeah. Her immediate plan back then, it was pretty tentative, almost kind of heartbreakingly small. Just try to somehow make online income, save up.
Which is hard enough as it is.
Right. And maybe, just maybe, get an apartment with a longtime online friend. That was the big goal.
And she mentioned struggling academically too, right? After the homeschooling.
She did. But she also found like genuine happiness and stability just doing an actual formal online high school program, which again highlights the potential educational gaps maybe opening up in these lifestyles.
But also her own drive, right? Seeking something better for herself.
Exactly. Her resilience.
And here's something I found really striking, that self-awareness. Even when she was desperate to get out, she specifically rejected making content about her escape.
Yeah, that was really thoughtful. She reasoned like, okay, it's not a long-term plan for content. There's only so much to say.
Right.
She needed stability first.
Yeah.
And maybe the most important part. She just didn't want to make public the only part of her life that hadn't already been splashed all over the internet.
That desire for privacy, finally. You can really feel how important that was to her.
Totally. And her story, well, it clearly hit a nerve online. The comment section just exploded. It became this whole other deep dive into much bigger issues.
So lots of reaction.
Oh, yeah. An immediate outpouring of concern. People really picked up on the deep loneliness she described. They offered practical suggestions like, hey, do you have any extended family you could reach out to? Which initially she thought wasn't even an option.
Okay. And college, was that mentioned?
Oh, frequently.
Yeah.
As like a concrete way out, which she was already thinking about, even though she worried about, being academically ready.
Understandable worry.
And there was one comment, post-speaker, that really underlined how severe her situation felt to some readers. Someone suggested she contact 1-800-RUNAWAY for resources.
Wow. Okay, so that's a national hotline, right? For crisis support, housing for young people.
Exactly. So it suggests some people saw her situation as genuinely vulnerable, like she lacked basic safety nets.
Right. And then the update. This is where it gets really interesting, you said.
Yeah, I mean, really interesting. Just 9 days. 9. After her original post, she posted an update. Things had moved incredibly fast.
9 days. That's lightning speed.
It is. She acknowledged just the overwhelming flood of helpful advice and resources she'd gotten, said she couldn't possibly reply to everyone, but she was deeply grateful.
Okay, but the big news, the turnaround.
The big news, the really dramatic part, is how she used the very thing she'd hated, the internet, right? The source of her whole public childhood.
Yeah.
She used it to find her mother's estranged family.
No way. How?
She had minimal info. Just her mom's uncommon maiden name and her birthplace. And she specifically mentioned, this newfound gratitude for the internet for this specific purpose. Kind of amazing irony.
That really is. So she just Googled.
Basically. She pieced it together and found her grandmother's Facebook account.
Wow. Facebook. Okay.
Yeah. She messaged her, explained the situation, and the grandmother was, as you can probably guess, absolutely appalled.
I bet.
Appalled to find out she even had a granddaughter she didn't know about, but also just horrified by how her daughter had chosen to raise her. Constantly in the public eye, no stability.
So the grandmother didn't know anything?
Apparently not. And OOP discovered she has an aunt and an uncle too. They've all been in constant contact since that first message, and all of them immediately wanted to help her leave.
That's incredible. Family stepping up.
Yeah, and she's 18, so legally, she can make that choice.
Yeah.
She even shared that her new family showed her proof about why her mom was estranged, like court-ordered proof that made sense to her, confirmed it wasn't the family just cutting her off for no reason.
Okay. So that resolves some potential doubts for her.
Right. Commenters, they speculated wildly about the reasons: family fights, inheritance, restraining orders, even wilder stuff. But the key thing for OOP was seeing that proof and understanding.
So a plan started to form. An escape plan.
Almost instantly. Arrangements were made for her to live with her aunt in a big West Coast city, a place with way more opportunities, especially for college, which she's now thrilled is a more obtainable option.
That's fantastic news. A safe landing spot.
Exactly. The aunt lives alone, has a spare bedroom, said she can stay as long as she needs. The aunt even bought her a train ticket. OOP just needed money to get to the station, which she had.
Wow. That's really moving, actually, the aunt just stepping in like that.
It really is.
Yeah.
And OOP mentioned she eventually wants to live in dorms when she gets to college. So staying with the aunt isn't like the forever plan, which also addresses some commenter concerns about her long-term independence.
Good. Smart thinking ahead.
Yeah.
What about telling her parents? That must be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, she was still figuring that part out. The how, the if. She even noted the irony, didn't she? Potentially leaving a video explanation if she couldn't tell them directly.
Making another piece of content about her life, essentially. Wow.
The irony is thick, yeah. And the content thing itself hadn't totally gone away. She mentioned she'd been sort of quietly resisting being filmed lately, and her parents hadn't pushed it, maybe sensing something was up.
Or just not wanting to rock the boat as she hit 18.
Could be. And she made this really crucial, strong plea for privacy in her update.
Right, because people were trying to figure out who she was.
Yeah, despite her being anonymous on Reddit, people were trying to guess her identity, publicly and privately. She begged them to stop.
Yeah.
Emphasized how much she wanted to keep this part of her life private, finally, unlike, her entire childhood.
Understandable. So the core of the update is hope.
Undeniably. She has a plan. She has a safe place to go with family she didn't know existed. And she feels genuinely, if maybe tentatively, hopeful about her future for the first time.
That's a powerful turnaround in just 9 days. Her
Yeah.
personal story is just incredibly compelling, inspiring even. But like you said, it opened the floodgates in the comments. It highlighted these much broader systemic issues.
Absolutely. Issues lurking just beneath the surface of all that shiny online family content. And it really forces a question for all of us watching online. How prevalent is the potential for exploitation, for harm, when kids are basically the main characters in monetized online content?
Yeah, and the language commenters used, it was pretty blunt, wasn't it?
It was stark, yeah. Reflecting that concern, people talked about parents treating kids like consumable content or figures in content farms, referring to the children as products, props, even cash cows.
Grim terms.
Very. Many drew this direct and, frankly, disturbing comparison to child actors, pointing out that kids featured constantly online lack the basic protections child actors usually have.
Like what kind of protections?
Things like limits on working hours, mandatory schooling requirements, and crucially, protection of their earnings.
It's actually alarming when you realize that laws specifically addressing this kind of online child labor exist in only 2 states in the U.S. right now.
Only 2? That's shocking considering how huge this is. That legal vacuum feels dangerous.
It really does. And there's this widely shared prediction among commenters, you see a lot, that we're probably going to see future lawsuits, kids turning 18 and suing.
Suing their own parents. Yeah. Demanding compensation for the millions, maybe, they helped earn. And demanding the removal of all that deeply personal childhood content. Everything from monetized potty training videos to teenage meltdowns shared for clicks.
Wow. That's a future legal battleground waiting to happen.
Seems likely. And beyond the money and labor stuff, the privacy and safety concerns are just immense. Commenters worried constantly about exposing kids to, well, weirdos and perverts, as they put it.
Yeah.
Noting things like the weirdly high number of adult male followers often seen on young girl influencer accounts, or the disturbing prevalence of, like, fetish bait content requests mentioned in other online communities.
Fetish bait, like people requesting specific types of videos.
Exactly. A commenter brought up examples from other creators, like Carissa Collins, where content was allegedly made based on specific fan requests that seemed, well, inappropriate. This wasn't OOP's experience, to be clear, but cited as an example of the broader risk, the vulnerability.
That's deeply disturbing.
It is. And then there are the more direct dangers, like tracking kids via location clues accidentally left in videos, online grooming risks, even the threat of deepfakes being made from their images.
Right, the deepfake issue is terrifying.
Yeah. Some brought up the photographer Sally Mann, how even well-intentioned artistic photos of her own children online attracted deeply disturbing attention years ago. It just underscores the risks of putting kids out there without their informed consent.
So moving past the content creation itself, the comments also painted a really stark picture of just the reality of nomadic lifestyles for kids, especially in RVs. A big contrast to the Instagram version.
Huge contrast. The lack of space and privacy for kids is this recurring kind of disturbing theme. Commenters described incredibly cramped living quarters, kids in tiny bunks, sometimes just shelves.
Shelves.
Yeah, or even sleeping on the floor. Often while the parents had their own private bedroom space. That detail came up a lot as being particularly egregious and common.
That feels fundamentally wrong.
It does. One commenter shared this extreme example of like 12 children crammed into a single RV while the parents had their own room. Someone else used the phrase gilded cage for similar situations on boats.
And the OOP herself used that Harry Potter analogy, didn't she?
She did, the room under the stairs, but even smaller. It's a perfect, relatable image for that lack of personal space.
And that physical reality, it connects directly to the lack of stability, right? Lack of community.
Absolutely. Kids need consistency. They just thrive on it. And it's incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to make real lasting friends when you move every few weeks. OBOFEs experience 0 in-person friends. That's the direct result.
That isolation must be profound.
It's a major issue commenters highlighted. And it's such a contrast to, say, traditional nomadic cultures, where families usually moved together in groups or had established seasonal camps. There was community, extended family, social structure built in.
Right. Modern individual family RV life often doesn't have that built-in support system.
Exactly. That crucial element is often missing.
Educational neglect was another big theme in the comments, too.
Yeah, definitely. OP mentioned her own academic struggles after homeschooling. Commenters talked about the potential pitfalls of, like, very loosely structured unschooling approaches.
If they lack rigor.
Right. If they don't consistently cover core subjects like math, science. Someone cited an example from another video where a parent seemed uncertain about basic math concepts a child should be learning.
And that obviously impacts preparedness for adulthood, for college, for just navigating the world.
Totally. Big impacts down the line.
And parental accountability. That must come up a lot.
Oh, constantly. Understandably. Some people speculated, maybe a nomadic lifestyle is sometimes chosen, consciously or not, to kind of avoid the oversight of authorities, like Child Protective Services.
Because they're harder to track if you keep moving.
Potentially. One commenter mentioned a specific bus family channel that apparently reacted really negatively and defensively when CPS was reportedly called to check on them.
Defensive reactions can sometimes be telling.
They can be. And like we mentioned with OP's mother, there was speculation about why she was estranged. Maybe simple disagreements, maybe something more serious involving legal stuff. But again, that was just commenters theorizing based on limited info.
Right. Important to keep that distinction.
The key point for OOP was she saw proof from her family.
And what about the role of the audience in all this, the viewers?
That came up too. Many commenters basically said viewers are a big part of the problem. By watching, sharing, and therefore monetizing content that features children so heavily.
So driving the demand.
Exactly. There were suggestions aimed at the platforms, like YouTube or Instagram, saying they should step in and demonetize channels that make kids their primary focus. Try to remove that huge financial incentive for parents to turn their kids' lives into content.
That's a tough one for platforms, balancing creator freedom and child protection.
It is. But the conversation is happening, and ultimately the psychological impact on these kids was a major focus. The potential for deep loneliness, difficulty forming stable relationships later on.
Because of the constant moving and lack of community.
Right. And the potential need for significant therapy in adulthood to process it all. Plus, the distinct possibility that these content kids, once they're independent, might start sharing some pretty negative behind-the-scenes stories.
Though, interestingly, OOP chose not to do that, right? She valued privacy more.
Exactly. Which maybe highlights a potential shift in priorities for these kids once they actually have agency over their own stories. Privacy might become the ultimate luxury.
So, bringing this all together, what does this deep dive really mean for you, the listener?
Well, for one, I think this story just offers a really stark, kind of unvarnished look behind the carefully curated, often idyllic-seeming online life.
Yeah, the ones presented by some creators. It's a powerful reminder that what you see online is almost never the full, complex reality, especially when kids are involved.
It really encourages all of us, I think, to apply more critical thinking to the online content we consume, especially stuff that heavily features children.
And it highlights those absolutely non-negotiable needs for kids, right? Stability, privacy, safety, community, consistent education.
Yeah, all those fundamental things for healthy development. And how easily they can get compromised, not just in certain alternative lifestyles, but particularly when those lifestyles get combined with constant, relentless online exposure and documentation.
So to wrap things up then, we've journeyed through this really challenging, isolated reality of one young woman's childhood in a traveling online RV family, and the dramatic, fast steps she took to escape it. Steps fueled by community support online, and amazingly, the kindness of family she never knew she had.
Yeah, her situation now, as detailed in that update, it's one of tentative hopefulness. She's planning for college, seeking a stable, private future. It's hopeful.
It is, but it leaves us with a pretty significant question to chew on, doesn't it?
I think so. As this first generation of kids raised entirely on social media platforms, whose whole childhoods have been documented, maybe monetized, for everyone to see as they come of age and get their own voice, what lasting impacts are we going to uncover on childhood itself, on privacy, on family dynamics?
And maybe more importantly, how will our legal frameworks, our societal understanding, need to adapt or maybe catch up to better protect the most vulnerable people in our increasingly online world?
That's the big question, I think.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive today. We hope it gave you plenty to consider.